And that's why sometimes I say to seekers, you know, what what do you imagine an answer could be to your question? What do you imagine it could be? Could it be another concept, a philosophy? Could it be a feeling? You know, if it were, would that be satisfying? Can you imagine me saying, "Oh, yep, Ingram's got the answer to enlightenment right here, all your questions," and I read out some paragraph of philosophical whatever? Could that ever? Could you imagine reading something and saying, "Oh, that's it. Got no questions about that. That's complete. Dotted every I, crossed every T there. No problem." So if it's not a concept or a feeling or anything that you can process, what the hell kind of answer could it be? It's not really the answer. It's the problem. It's the question. It's the belief that you can question what is. Questions occur within what is. An answer occurs within what is, but they don't contain what is. I think I said the other night that if you're asking what you are, well, you're not an idea. You're not a concept. You're not a feeling. All those things are ephemeral and changing. And none of those things can be what you are.
The nonprofit TAT Foundation was created in 1973 to bring spiritual seekers and finders together. We publish books, videos, and a free online newsletter. We maintain a website of spiritual resources and hold 4 spiritual retreat weekends each year. Our goal is to offer practical guidance for following a spiritual path and living a spiritual life. For more information, go to tatfoundation.org. That's tatfoundation.org.
So that's the impermanence characteristic, the clue to look for. The next one has an awkward name. It's called dissatisfactoriness. That's what he calls it. I don't like that name. There's a Buddhist term, dukkha, right? And how would you explain that?
Unsatisfactory.
Okay, it's not just like aversion to something. It's when you want something as well. When you find yourself trying to, reach for something, grasp for something, or to get away from something. So sometimes it's just called suffering. And these kind of things are very close to your identity. And if you can catch those in awareness, so the idea is as you're experiencing things, make a special note if you can catch dissatisfaction, the urge to get out of the present moment somehow.
Something should be different. Yeah.
Something should be different, exactly. Yeah, can you catch that?
You also look for what was my motivation for something I just did.
I think that might fall under psychological analysis, deconstructing what your story is and why you're doing things. That would probably not be productive in this style. That would be productive in another way, but in this style, you just want to follow. We just want to say, oh, there's that experience of dissatisfaction. I caught it. I just became aware of it. That makes you a little distance from it. It makes it less sticky. You're less attached to it. My example of that would be, well, probably everyone's had this happen to them where they sit down to meditate, if you're meditators, and you're sitting there, and this would happen to be quite often, like 30 seconds into it, I would think, this is not going very well. I seem to have lost focus. Should I keep pushing through with this, or should I just give up right now? Because I'm not doing too well. This is not working. And so sometimes I'd have these good meditations where I'd get through it, and it's like, all right, did well. And other times I'd be struggling. And then I realized, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be noting. That's the experience I'm having. It doesn't matter if it's a good or bad meditation. It just matters you're noting what's going on. And so it became like a game. And it became sort of fun to sit down to meditate and say, okay, I'm going to try to catch the first time I have a thought that this isn't going well. And so those feelings are very useful. It's very useful to catch those, because it's like you're mostly focused out here on things in the external world, but the things that are close to you are a little bit harder to focus on. And things that are like dissatisfaction or self-doubt in particular, those are really close to you. And so if you can catch them, you're seeing more and more of your reality. In particular, you're seeing more and more of what you think you are, or the self-illusion, by doing that. And plus those feelings get the script kind of gets flipped on them. They become actually helpful to have those sort of feelings. And also, like I was talking about with pain, I get headaches a lot, and at first I thought the idea of meditating on my headache would be pretty horrific. But because of impermanence, you notice that I'm not always having the headache. There's a sensation of pain, but it's broken up by many, many things. As I'm following what's actually happening, only a small percentage of that is the pain. There's awareness of so many other things going on at the same time. So in a way, it's by actually seeing pain and not making up some kind of story about it dominating your life, and it kind of relieved the pain for me. And this became a way for me to bring meditation and insight into my daily life as well. So in this practice, you'll have like a daily practice, and then you're going to go to a retreats and really work hard at it. But then there's sort of a third leg in which you try to bring it into your just daily life. And so I found that during the day, if I experienced anxiety, I would try to spot it. I would try to spot when I experienced it. I would say, oh, there, I just had a pulse of anxiety. I became aware of that. And by becoming aware of it, it's sort of make a game out of it. And I became less attached to it. And it would tend to actually relieve the anxiety, because I wouldn't then go on and start weaving a bunch of stories and narrative around it. So that was very powerful for me, because it gave me an incentive, like a reward, for noticing dissatisfaction. And in return, that dissatisfaction leads you deeper into yourself.
What do you mean by that?
The direction inward is the direction of yourself, of what you think you are, of what you identify with. And those feelings of dissatisfaction you identify with them very strongly. I look at that lamp over there, I don't identify with it. But if I think about anxiety, I feel anxiety about something, I'm strongly identified with that. So being able to see that is getting deeper within. That's the direction you want to go, and toward things that you're not seeing. Because if you're on a spiritual path because something feels wrong, like incomplete, there's something not right about the way you're seeing the world, then it might be because you're believing something wrong, and you have to see it first before you can question it. But we often can't even see what our own beliefs are, what our assumptions are. So we have to start looking around, and it's most useful to look within, because that's where those things are hiding. And the closer they are to you, the harder they are to see. So when you see something you're very identified with, that's the right direction. That's getting you closer to this core mystery. You guys buying this, or you think making any sense to you?
I like the last thing you said. I mean, I liked everything you said, but that last thing, like if you're a spiritual path because you feel incomplete, it just means you're not seeing something right. It's like a good yardstick to come back to, right?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Just like, oh yeah, I'm just not seeing something right.
Right.
And what you said, the way you described going within, I don't know, it's the clearest to me that I've ever heard someone kind of describe that. where it's, yeah, like you said, a lamp is outside, and then like a feeling of anxiety is also outside. And so if you can identify that, then it's like, okay, now I'm ready to see the next layer in thing that's not me or of an experience.
Right, you're discovering things that you haven't noticed before.
Right.
And for me, that was very exciting, because I was thinking, I want to know what the hell's going on. And when I realized that, oh, behind the curtains here, there's all this machinery, puppetry here. I better start looking there. I might start learning something about what's going on. You know, when I first started seeking, I didn't know there was a within. You know, I didn't know that you could do that. And so I heard about meditation, and I thought, oh, that sounds painful. Oh man, I don't want to do that. But after a while, I thought, hey, look, this is a technique. What am I afraid of? Let's give it a try. But then I thought, there's no way I can sit in this chair for an hour and focus on anything like that. So I thought, okay, here's the deal. I will just sit for 3 minutes. I say, I'm going to lower the bar and say, for 3 minutes, I'm going to try this looking within. And so for 3 minutes, to me that was like, good, I can do that. Yes, just lower the bar until you've got the energy to do it, right? And so I did that for 3 minutes, and I realized, you know what, there is stuff happening in there. And I made a little journal entry and wrote down kind of what I saw. And I was so excited about that I just kept doing little 3-minute meditations, and then it went to 5 minutes and 7 minutes, and I would go up to half an hour or so like that, because I saw this is a direction that I haven't been before, and this is fruitful. I'm seeing all kinds of new stuff. And so Vipassana for me was just really a continuation of that. I didn't realize I could get even deeper than that I could actually see things even finer detail and faster. And so that made a lot of sense to me.
When you were doing your practice, and say you saw, like, maybe for the first time you saw, like, oh, this like anxious feeling, you saw it like in experience for the first time, maybe?
Yeah, I was consciously aware of it instead of being caught up in it. Right. And that was astonishing to me. It was liberating.
Yeah, I can imagine. But using your practice, did you allow yourself to like stay on that, or you were just like, no, I just noted, and do you know what I mean? Like,
well, I could see that noting it was creating this consciousness of it.
Oh, okay.
And so I now had a different relationship with those feelings than I'd ever had before. And then it seemed logical to me and it was a relief to that, a reward to that. So it seemed logical to me that every time it came up at work or driving, that if I could become conscious of it, I would get that relief again from it. I could see it for what it really is instead of the monster I was imagining it to be. And so that propelled me on.
Maybe I guess if you feel some negative feeling, something that you feel you need to do something about, like right now, it might be that you're identifying with it, right?
Yeah, right.
If you feel like something that couldn't be there, like the jerking reaction, like I need to, this shouldn't be there, or I need to do something about it, probably means like that you identify with it somehow.
Yeah, it's like it's picked you up and is carrying you along now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would have this experience driving to work that I would worry about what I was going to do in the future. Like I'm working on a project, but then that's going to end. What am I supposed to come up with for the next project? You know, but there was nothing to be done about that right then.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the point of worrying about it? But I would get caught up in useless worrying. But when I became aware that, oh, there's that worry impulse, then I could let it go and not carry me away. I've noticed recently it's evolved a little bit. Now when I worry about something, I think, oh, maybe some new idea is coming up. You know, like what am I going to do for my next project? Or I'm in a writer's group, and it's like, oh my God, I got to write a story. And so I will get this worry impulse that comes up. says, "You better write this story. How much time do you have?" And I'll try to flip on a script and say, "Oh, okay. I guess the story's coming to me. It's coming up." And then I just look at it like I'm opening a box and say, "Oh, is this the mailbox or something?" And saying, "Oh, is there something after that thought?" Once you acknowledge that thought, it can move on. And is there something else, like a story idea or something in there that's going to come up? And so I'm still experimenting with worry and how that might be useful. So let's go into the third characteristic, because I've already been talking about it quite a bit, and it's called the no self characteristic. And that's something that I learned from TAT, and I summarize it as, if you can see it, you can't be it. That's the core insight. And I've been saying this all along, that when you can see, you become consciously aware of these experiences, it creates this separation, a distancing from it. You're less attached to it. And there's a basic mechanism there of that lamp. If I can see it over there, I can see it. I can see all that lamp over there. It's not me, obviously. And things that are closer to me, like my body, if I can be conscious of seeing it, I can see my body, or at least parts of my body, and I can realize that, well, there must be another part of me, because it's outside of that. And then you can use that to back up into the self.
Is the viewer is not the view.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. And so that idea was introduced to me at TAT. And so I was already working with that. And then when I came into Vipassana, I thought, I know how to do that one. So I was a monster on that one, man. I was all over that guy. The dissatisfactoriness, it wasn't as intuitive to me. The impermanence I could see. But boy, did I work that no-self aspect. That was really, really highly useful to me. Because, I had been doing that for quite a while. And is that intuitive to you guys too? This idea that if you can see it, you can't be it. The view is not the viewer. Like, if you can look at it, then it's outside of you.
Pretty much so, except the situation like when, suppose you have something in your body or something like, and when you try to view it, it would, for example, like jump or like move backwards. Like every time you would view it, it would like fall backwards. So it would always move with your attempt to view it. That kind of would make it feel like it's like part of you, because your effort to view it would make it seemingly move.
What would make what move? What is the object you're talking about here?
Well, I guess that would be like how you try to maybe view the viewer or something.
Yeah.
But even like, I don't know, if there would be something like, if you try to view, I don't know, maybe, well, usually things pass by, but yeah, if some muscle would move in your head, like, or something like that, by trying to view it, and if you're trying to view some parts of the brain, and then you feel like something is moving in your brain, that might cause, like, create this correlation that, my effort to view something changes something. That maybe this thing is part of me because my effort is correlated to this thing. It's like how you try to test, like, if you have free will, I could move my finger, something like that, right or left. Because I expected, like, I thought about moving it right, and the expectation, like, matched, I guess, right? More or less, yeah, I moved it right. So you think maybe I'm the controller in some way.
Yeah.
There's some proof to that in some way. Although it's some time, if you check backwards, might be not true, but
yeah, you can examine that under meditation. You can say, here, so there's an experience that happens, and then when you become aware of it, that's another experience. That other experience is gone. The new experience is becoming aware of it. And then there might be experience and impulse to try to control it or something, or to notice that it's changing. And then there's an experience in there that tries to take credit for that. That's the I experience. It's in there. And so it's coming by real quick. And you can parse that out, all those little pieces there. And seeing that I experience sneak in there and take ownership, that's very powerful. because this idea of no self, when you can see these other experiences, you can start to see they're not you. But there are experiences that are hard to see as not you because they're very close to you. And as you keep doing this gives you a reverse vector. It gives you a way of backing up. By seeing more and more things as not you, you start eliminating ideas, assumptions you had about what you are. And it's the retreat from untruth, as Rose would say.
Could you see like the viewer is not you? And like it seems to be hard to see the viewer as totally not you.
So yes, this is where I got to in my practice, was that I backed up all the way to sensations of self. And then at first it felt like, okay, there is this sort of self. I feel like I'm behind my eyes or something like that. And then I realized, oh wait, that's actually a sense of location. And then there's separate from that a sense of self that doesn't have a location. So I got rid of the location part of it. And then it was like, okay, what's left from that? And that thing under observation, I kept getting more and more subtle. At first I thought maybe it was a thought, but it wasn't. It was more like a feeling. And then it became kind of whittled down to a subtle knowing. And it was quite hard to chase it and find it sometimes. But under practice, I stabilized that and I could look at it. But then I got into this problem that I believe you were just describing, is that I could see this self, this sensation, this subtle knowing of self. But as soon as I saw it, then, well, no, I can't be that. The no self characteristic. I'm over here looking at it. So I can't be that. And then so now it jumps to this other being over here, which then immediately is invalidated. And it was just like putting two mirrors in front of each other and seeing this infinite regression of selves. And I was frustrated by that for quite a while.
Trying to catch it ran away from you.
Yeah, it was like I'm sitting here chasing. This is a wild goose chase. This is not gonna ever end. But then I saw through the trick. There was a trick going on, a magic trick, and I don't know why this delights me so much, but I came up with an example for this magic trick that I call Fort Knox in my pocket. And this is a really dumb trick. Imagine that I pull out of my pocket this gold coin, and I said, I've got 1,000 more of these in my pocket. I'm going to prove it to you. I take this gold coin and I do like this. And I pull out another one. I say, there's number 2. And then I do like this. Oh, there's number 3. And I just keep going. And of course you would not be fooled by such a stupid trick as that. But that's exactly the trick that's going on when you see this infinite regression of eyes. If you look moment to moment, what's happening is that you experience that sensation of eye, then you experience noting it. And then you experience the sensation of I. There's 2 experiences that are just happening one after another. It's not a new I that's coming back. It's just the same experience of I that got interrupted for a moment. And then you just feel it again.
It's like jumping quickly between those 2.
It's just jumping quickly between those 2. And that's why you need to get sped up on the meditation to be able to actually catch that. That's the little sleight of hand, the illusion going on at that deep level. And so then I could see that, that self isn't any different than any other experience. It's just sitting there in that experiential stream, just like every other experience is. And this is a little off topic, but it's come to mind now. I noticed by following that self that it had a sort of rate at which it would appear. So like looking at that lamp there, the feeling of self would not come up all that often with regard to that lamp. But I was giving an example earlier of like if you put your car keys here on the table and you put someone else's car keys on there, if you look at those other car keys, you won't feel the self coming up all that much. But when you look at your own car keys, then you'll start that experience of self will come up more frequently. And it's almost like its job is to tell you what's yours. So when that feeling of self will come up very rapidly when it's something that you identify with and think is yours. And things that are not you, it doesn't come up as much. So that's what I saw under this observation in myself, that I feeling has a function. It functions for a reason. It's in there for a reason. But it's just a feeling like every other feeling. And that is the sort of insight you can get with Vipassana meditation.
We have a half an hour.
I got half an hour? Well, that's plenty of time.
It's 11.
You're getting pretty close to the end here.
So, I guess, maybe I'm thinking out loud about what you said, because it's the experience of the same self, but just in a different context, I guess. You're saying that's the trick, where it feels like, because, people in TAT and stuff, they talk about like ego 1 and ego 2. I don't remember where is that Pulyan or, yeah. Where it's like when you're meditating and then there's the little voice that's like, oh, that's not you. But it's like, well, this isn't you. There's like, or like the sinner and the saint voice in your head. Or like, oh, that's terrible. And like, oh, this is good. And you saw that, like, how is it, I'm trying to think about the experience of that. Because it does feel like there's two, at minimum two. But I'm not sure what my question is. But
well, you're making a connection between these things.
Yeah, I just feel like
seeing maybe there's,
because I just feel when you said that was like what came up for me. Where I'm like, like with the feels like, well, which one? There's a bunch of eyes, and they feel like they're hard to catch. Like you were saying, I resonate with what you were saying. Like,
kind of reminds me of the experiment we did at the beginning, which is like, is your attention on both of them at the same time?
Yeah.
Like you need like at least two voices to like express this opinion. Now you have like at least two different voices to like choose from, or just to have something. But with only one voice, you would like not maybe hear clearly or something.
To keep the argument going.
Yeah, that's the direction.
The self-important argument. And then if there is no argument, then
to make it
the
move,
self-important.
make it move to some direction. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't a well-formulated question.
No. I love questions. I love talking.
I see what you mean.
I love when you guys talk. It's very helpful. You're showing me your cards, so to speak, when you talk. And, I want to hear that kind of stuff.
I like that. I mean, like, it's just useful for me, like, that kind of stuff when you see, like, when you start to realize what the job of all the stuff is, it's like your vision is there, like your brain is there to like fill, or like when you, it's like, like when you if you've ever done like an interview of someone and you're recording it and you're on the street or something, and then you listen back and there's all this street noise, but you didn't hear the street noise, you were hearing them talk, because like your brain can filter out. So it's like learning how your mind works to trick you. Like, it's a trick.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a true microphone picks up all of it. It's not a true microphone. And it's doing that, it has a reason that we evolved to have that. And it's the same thing, like you were saying, with like the self's job is to tell you what's yours.
Yeah.
So that you don't, pick up the wrong
yeah,
spear or
someone else's keys.
Yeah, whatever. That's like your life in this reality, in this world, is like manageable to live, but it's not helping you figure out what you really are. It's just helping you.
It's almost like it evolved for a reason, but it became convenient or as an approximation to believe in it as an independent thing, because it wasn't a problem for a while. But then, at some point in your life, you want to understand something better. You realize you're at the limit of, there's something wrong in your perception. And so you go looking for what that is. And, it just turns out that there's nothing evil about this eye. It was just doing its job. but we put too much weight on it, too much significance on it.
Well, because the I is so prevalent, is that why we like to have wars? Because this guy has his story and this guy has his story, and they're not compatible. So that's why we got to get away from the I.
I would soften that and say it's enough to see it. It's enough to see it. And if you feel like getting away from it is what you need to do, pursue that. But seeing the I and seeing it for what it is brings it down off this pedestal. So Vipassana wasn't my final step. At the end of the retreat with Ingram in those 7 days, he surprised me by saying something that I wasn't expecting, and that it doesn't appear to be in his book, and I haven't heard anyone else say that they ever heard him say it. But at the end of those 7 days, he told me, look, your practice is perfect. You've got your concentration maximized. From now on, I want you just to stare at the I am. Instead of noting everything that was going on, he said, just focus on the I am from now on. And that was, it was like all my practices and my paths, things that I tried, consolidated into one thing then. Because I had already been looking at the I am. I was reading Nisargadatta's book, I Am That, and he said, meditate on the I am. And then when Ingram said that to me, it just made complete sense to me. That's the thing I care about. That's what, for me, I'm not saying that's true for you, but for me, I knew the problem originated with that I am. That was the source of the mystery. That's the nut I needed to crack. And all this concentration I'd built up, it made sense. Just put it on that. Look at the thing that I was curious about. And so I did that. I used this no self thing to focus down, drill down on that I am. But what I found was that it just didn't work anymore. I could see the sensation of I, and I was trying to get behind it by saying, okay, look, I just saw it, I'm not it, so voila, I should be free of it. I should be free of this attachment to it. But I wasn't. And then, so a few months of that, I had high energy at this too. I could stare at it for hours. And then a few months later, I just had a shift where I stopped trying to see it as different than me. I stopped trying to do this no self thing. The feeling was, I just surrendered to it. If it's there, and I can't get rid of it, it's immovable. It's so strong that I can't do anything about it. Then why don't it just take the load? It can carry me instead of me attacking it. It can just carry me. So I just rested in it, and that was a spontaneous shift. There was some kind of giving up, and I just started resting in it. Later I tried to rationalize why I did that, but really it just happened spontaneously. I just rested in it, and I could still see that. Okay, it's obviously intellectually this can't be me because I'm still looking at it. But if it won't go away, then I'll just let it do all the work. That's kind of the way it sounded in my head. It's like, I don't have to do anything. This thing is there. It can support me. It's like a strong pillar. I can just rest on top of it.
Can you describe what you mean by what it was you were resting on? Like
This knowing of being. It was for me, the I am had been whittled down to this kind of subtle certainty, a subtle knowing that I exist.
Okay.
That I'm here. And I could stabilize that in meditation and look at it, but it still seemed to be special. I mean, it still seemed to control me. It still seemed to have all the power it had before, even though I was looking at it. And then I surrendered to it, and I just rested in it. So it became my anchor in meditation of just resting in it. I wasn't trying to see through it with no self-characteristics or look at impermanence of it. I was just sitting in it. And then one day, I was during a phone conversation, I was talking about it, it disappeared. it just fell away. And I was astonished, absolutely astonished by that. And I was really pretty ecstatic about it too. It was a really amazing experience. But then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, I've spent years perfecting the ability to find this thing. Maybe I could find it if I look again. And so I started looking for it again, and I did find it again. And what I found was that before, there's this whole stream of experiences, but this one experience was like on this tall pedestal, and it was special somehow. And then it fell off the pedestal one day, and it just fell back into the regular stream of experiences and was no longer special. It was just another experience. And it seemed like it disappeared, but it was still there. It was still doing its function of telling me, when someone calls my name, to respond. It's still in there functioning. It just wasn't special.
Self-referential thoughts you kind of could be still coming to you. I mean, self-referential thoughts could still be going on.
Yeah, it was still doing its function to have self-referential thoughts. It would speed up when, oh, these are my glasses. That there would be the sensation of these glasses, the breakdown of what their shape is, and that I would be in there very quickly, making me feel like, oh, these are mine. And that's perfectly fine. It's just doing what it's supposed to do. But it was no longer elevated on this dais of this is me. And so that was my experience of the I. It seemed to disappear, but it was actually still down there, just amongst the common folk, doing its everyday job.
It doesn't need to be protected so much.
Right, it doesn't need to be protected.
So you kind of see backwards, like how it got elevated to this pedestal. I guess maybe in childhood it happens, like when it's child.
I think so. I think that's one way of understanding it, is that, I have 2 sons, and when they kind of hit their teenage years, and I would hear them talking to each other and their friends, and it was a little cringy and insufferable, because it was this incessant me kind of talk. And I realized, oh, that's what needs to develop right now. They're trying to develop a me. They're trying to get this sense of I, what I am, and building this self-story. And that's perfectly normal. It's as normal as children playing with toys. They go through stages.
Did Rose say that you have to start with a strong self-identity before you can go beyond that?
Yeah, because if there's something wrong in there, something that hasn't developed fully, then that may be where the attention has to go before you can then go beyond it. So I would suspect it might be something along those lines.
If your leg hurts or something, you need to first fix your leg, like I don't know, before like thinking about.
Yeah, possibly how it works. Although when that I fell away, that wasn't the end of the journey either, for me. There was more to realize, but after that, I didn't have a technique to work with. But that's getting off the Vipassana story. But Vipassana was the thing that allowed me to drill in deep enough to see these kind of things. And so I guess the point of this workshop is to put out there, just put that in the back of your mind, the possibility that this could happen. You can actually see in that direction, that there is further to go in that direction. If you start feeling like, I've kind of exhausted my options, you haven't yet. There is more to see.
So afterwards, you said it wasn't the end of the path. So it was you just had more natural curiosity about the things you wanted to explore about, and know yourself as a result.
So I was ecstatic for a while when the I am dropped away. I really liked that, but I started asking myself, okay, well, so what do I think I am now? If I'm not the I am, what is it? And the answer was awareness. I said, I'm just the awareness of everything. But maybe it's just being who I am. I thought, how could I test that? Like, does that really make sense? because it seemed like it was just another dichotomy. I just split the world into another two pieces: this awareness, and then the things that were in awareness, or the objects of awareness. I could sense that, okay, I've got two pieces here that can't really be two pieces because they must interact, so they must be connected. And I realized I've still got some kind of misunderstanding, or I became dissatisfied with thinking that I was the awareness, or even experiencing that as myself as the awareness. It became dissatisfying to me. I felt like that wasn't a complete realization, but I didn't have any idea what to do about it, because my meditation techniques were exhausted at that point. I didn't have a tool, and so I was really doing nothing about it. And then one day, spontaneously, I woke up and the problem wasn't there anymore, and that was a big shock. And then so I asked myself, wait, I always had this question, what's the answer to the question? Why am I not bothered by this anymore? So I asked myself the question, am I the awareness? And the response I got was hilarity. It was just funny to me, the idea that I had made up this story about awareness and things, objects in awareness. I had made up this little game. It's like I'm playing with little dolls or something and making up a drama, and then getting really caught up in it and upset. And, and then I realized, no, it's just the mind doing what the mind does. The mind loves to tell stories. It loves to take something. It can't process what is. It can say, oh, everything is one, but it can't process that. It can't think about oneness. It can't think about anything absolute. It can't think about non-existence. It just thinks it's thinking about it. It makes up something to substitute. It makes a little doll that says, I'm awareness, or I'm the absolute, or I'm non-existence, and then it plays a little game with the things that are absolute and the things that are not absolute, and it plays a little drama with them. And then we get really upset about it. And I realized that the mind will never be able to. The mind's always trying to break things apart and play little games with them. And these questions that I had just originated from the mind.
Did you have a non-mind experience, where things like absolute awareness and non-existence became real?
So that's where I can't use language. And immediately after my experience, I had the feeling that I'm never going to talk about this again, because it would be a total mistake to talk about it. The mistake is talking about it. The mistake is conceptualizing it, because I can't. I'll just say I could. When the mind quit and it said, the mind realized how it was tricking itself, and it was never going to do anything other than that. It's like I became aware, or the mind isn't everything. There is just what is, and that isn't a concept. So it's not something that you're going to talk about. And in fact, it's not something your mind can be interested in. It cannot be interested in anything that it can't play with. And something that's absolute or whole, it doesn't have pieces, the mind can't work with it or do anything with it. And so when you say, did you become aware of non-experience or absolute or anything like that, I don't have any words to answer that. I can say that the problems all resolve themselves, and that if I had to put words on it, I would just say there's what is. There's just what is. And that was beyond self-evident. If there was a word to express something that's more than self-evident, that's the word you would use about it. And so my feeling was that, there's no way to communicate this. And anything I say about it is going to be a mistake, because you have no choice but to conceptualize it. And by putting in words, that's what happens. and you have no choice but to receive it as a concept, and which in some sense is just messing you up further. So I'm attempting it, but with these qualifications.
So that followed the realizing that you can't kind of partition, or that's all the mind's ever going to do.
Yeah, that's what the mind does, and it's totally
But I'm
okay.
saying that piece that you're talking about like came in the wake of that.
It's
the
like
polarity.
when the mind stops demanding that what is be a concept or a
Yeah.
feeling or something it can play with, then it becomes
Receptive.
perfectly obvious what is. What is what is, and it doesn't have characteristics, it doesn't have depth, you don't get deeper into it. It doesn't have temporal characteristics, it's neither point-like nor infinite. it's what is. And that becomes perfectly obvious. And the mind, my mind at least, in the 7 years, it's actually been 7 years and a month, so I'm past the statute of limitations. And I'm scot-free now. It's been satisfied with that. It's never gone back to trying to seek for that again.
You talk about it like there was an intermittent kind of passage between the I am dropping away and then this, right?
There was a period of time where I didn't know what to do.
Right,
You
and
know.
so you're saying even the objects of awareness versus awareness was kind of after the I am dropping. I was just wondering do you think it could be in someone else's semantics, they would consider that still the I am?
Possibly.
And the reason I'm asking is just because I was just thinking, like, just splitting them in that way, it's like it's still a form of asking, well, then what am I?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's exactly
Okay.
that. Yeah, I was
It's like
saying I'm the
you-
awareness.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just made another dichotomy.
Right.
I just made another little set of paper mache dolls and called this one awareness and this one's the objects in awareness.
Well, I'm aware of the I ams.
And it was a switch.
Yeah.
And so when you switch and you get rid of something that was a burden, you get this ecstasy, this bliss of look what's happened. I'm free now. But then this subtle dissatisfaction comes in because you're actually still playing a game that your intuition tells you isn't actually true. And and at some point, for some reason, it's like the mind could see that it was fooling itself the whole time, and all those questions were just generated by the mind as part of its own game. And so when people say, well, what's the answer to the question? Well, I can say the question resolves itself. The question goes away as being based on false premise to begin with.
You're saying like the intuition knows it's false or something like that. Do you think in a way it's like a built-in instinct of dissatisfaction that it can still sense that it's somehow just a product of the mind and it's just not going to be?
Yeah, the mind is not satisfied with its own stories. It's always changing
It's
them,
bullshit.
probing them.
Yeah.
The mind knows, wait a minute, this doesn't, it's like a circus tent when you don't have enough poles. They put up poles here and you notice over here it's sagging down and it's forever trying to grab the world and control and conceptualize the entire world as a feeling or as a thought, and it can't ever do it, and so it's never satisfied with that. And then when it realized that it was never meant to do that, it's not within its power to do that. For me, my experience was my mind was satisfied by that. It could see that, it saw that, and it just stopped trying. It just stopped utterly trying to do that. And it went on playing its games with other things. I'm still interested in all kinds of things. And we have conversations and we're making up stories. And my mind loves to do that kind of stuff. But apparently it's not going to go back to taking them too seriously and trying to capture everything. It knows that the game just continues, and it's okay. That's its function.
But what's trying to take it so seriously? Some programs, some force. Like something is before was trying to take so seriously, and then let's go towards letting go. Yeah, it just happens, I guess. Yeah.
The mind is feeble. We have feeble minds. Our minds can get confused easily. It confuses itself. And it just needed to get clarity on that thing.
So now the mind doesn't want to be right all the time. The I doesn't insist on want to be right.
It knows it can never venture into anything absolute, into anything whole, any kind of unity, anything like that. It's not what it does, and it stays in its lane. It's not trying to do something impossible anymore. And does it want to be right? Yeah, it likes being right. There's an ego and all that kind of stuff, but it knows that there is no absolute right. It's not going to put that sort of weight on right or wrong, because there'll just be another story, another episode after this episode that's going to it's a never-ending comic strip, No matter what happens, there's going to be another story that comes after that.
Can we discover one physical theory, and then there comes another physical theory that's even better explains this, and another one that's even better explains this stuff.
Yeah, right. It'll just keep going forever, because any new explanation, any new answer is going to be grounds for you to ask new questions about it. And that's why sometimes I say to seekers, what do you imagine an answer could be to your question? What do you imagine it could be? Could it be another concept, a philosophy? Could it be a feeling? If it were, would that be satisfying? Can you imagine me saying, oh, yep, Ingram's got the answer to enlightenment right here, all your questions, and I'll read out some paragraph of philosophical whatever. Could that ever? Could you imagine reading something and saying, that's it. Got no questions about that. That's complete. Dotted every I, crossed every T there. No problem. No, you're going to parse all those words and say, well, what does he mean by that? And then, so there's no answer in that form that's going to work. Your mind's just going to parse that and keep coming up with new questions. Nor is a feeling going to work either, because of impermanence.
Can it work for a few minutes maybe, and for a limited amount of time?
Yeah, you might have cosmic consciousness or something like Bob was talking about, and you might say, this is it, but then it passes. So it's not it. And so if it's not a concept or a feeling or anything that you can process, what the hell kind of answer could it be? So it's not really the answer, it's the problem, it's the question. It's the belief that you can question what is. Questions occur within what is. An answer occurs within what is, but they don't contain what is. I think I said the other night that if you're asking what you are, well, you're not an idea. You're not a concept. You're not a feeling. All those things are ephemeral and changing. And none of those things can be what you are, because they're impermanent, because they're dissatisfying, because they're not self. That's where those characteristics come in.
How do you examine the sense of existing? Because that doesn't feel to change necessarily.
I thought it was quite difficult. When I read Nisargadatta's book, he said, just meditate on the I am. That's real pleasant. That's nice. I would think, okay, what is the I am? And I was never real clear about it. That's how I just started thinking. I did a body scan. You were talking about a body scan. So I did this body scan thing where I'd say, okay, I'm going to scan my body and find where is the me. And it came down to it looks like it's right behind my eyes. somewhere in my head. And then I just said, well, that's not very interesting. But then a few months later, I came back to it, and I realized, actually there's a feeling of location, and then there's the feeling of me. So the head part was just another feeling. It wasn't me, it was the feeling of location. And then the me feeling turned out to be locationless, zoneless. And so then I started, but that felt subtle. And so I had to chase it around for a while. I'd sit down and try to meditate on it. It'd take me a while to get to it. But then it stabilized. And then under Vipassana, I could go even further with it. So it's tricky. It's a flighty thing. But if you get interested in it, it can be examined. If at some point you think that that's important, it's enough to know that you could go that direction. If you get an impulse to.
It feels like I don't feel like I'm at that last point or whatever, but I'm just like, it feels different from just noticing eye sensation, like with the car keys, or somebody says, hey, I hate your outfit or something, whatever, like that, that like kind of ego stuff almost, but that, it feels like the baseline of it, of everything happening, the fact that I exist, that something exists. It's like, because I don't have anything to compare it to. Like, I don't have non-existence to compare it to, like you were talking about. So it's like, I don't even know how to look at it.
Well, do you feel it sometimes and not feel it other times?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's like a taking for granted kind of thing.
Yeah. So you can not take it for granted. You could say, I want to detect the first time I become conscious of myself. And you could try to find it. You could go after it and say, well, I'm having the experience of somebody talking right now that doesn't feel like me. But then, you mentioned, like, if someone insults you, then you might feel it.
Right.
And so you say, oh, it's somewhere in there, that feeling. And then you could just become training yourself to notice that feeling each time. And as you stare at it, it will tend to be composed of multiple feelings of different things, and some of those can be eliminated as what you are. And you can get more subtle, as you can be almost like it evaporates down to some more specific thing.
Because even like emotions, like, I got into this thing called like the change triangle. It's like a psychological thing where, like, behind defense coping mechanisms and like anxiety and all these other things, there's like these core emotions like anger, sadness, joy, excitement, fear. And like, if you let yourself, basically the theory is, if you let yourself experience the core emotions are like a wave, and they crest and they crash. And then, according to this theory, you're in what they call like the open-hearted state of the authentic self or something like that. And so I've watched this all happen before. I've like seen it. I've been like, oh, I'll do a scan and be like, oh, this is the emotion behind this anxiety or whatever thing, coping mechanism, using jokes and sarcasm or something. It's like, because I'm afraid to feel or whatever. And then I felt like I ended up in this, like, I felt in this very open-hearted state, but there's still, to me, I'm like, okay, but this is like, still there's like a sense of being a thing that's different from other things.
Yeah, that's it. That's the sensation right there.
It's just hard to, like, I'm like, how do I just keep looking at that?
It's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy. Yeah. You gotta be a maniac like me. Like, I mean, you gotta think, you know what, that's where the issue is. I was convinced of that. That's what led me to sit down every day and try to chase this thing. But if you don't feel that impulse, don't feel like you ought to. I mean, but I just want you to know that is possible, because I didn't know it was even possible.
Yeah.
It is an option.
Yeah,
to go that
until
direction.
we're talking about today, it's like I didn't even know how to approach that as a problem. Like, how do I look at that? Like, it almost feels like the existence. You can't study non-existence, like you were saying before. It's like impossible. So I'm like, how do I don't even know.
But you can study what you think existence is.
Right.
It's like you can't know what non-existence is, but if you say, but you're saying the word, so something is there. You can look at what you're replacing it with, and if you look at that carefully, you'll probably find the idea of maybe being in a dark place. Maybe laying in a coffin or something like that. You'll find that you are using something there. You'll say, "Oh, well, I can't contemplate that." But if you're putting the word out, your mind is doing something there. And you can look into what is it actually contemplating. And it's some kind of, everyone's got something different. But it's usually some version of sitting in a dark place. Non-existence is like being in darkness or something, which is just another experience. This is another form of existence. That's all it could ever contemplate. So that might be a useful direction to you if you found yourself curious about that.
Do you feel like these aspects like impermanence or dissatisfaction are also you kind of like, how to say, like maybe you see you're not a thing but you're also everything? Like, does it seem like those changing aspects are also kind of you or part of it? I don't know. Or they're probably more like part of it than they're you, or there is no you.
Those are questions. Those are great questions that you can pursue. You can look into your own experience and test those questions and say,
I'm thinking like if something, for example, is changed in impermanent, still still it seems like maybe it's something that's still tangible. Like even if it's changing, it's like I don't know. There could be like a function or something that's like changing, but there is still a function with some main role. There is something like core about it, in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, these are exactly the questions I ask myself. I would look at impermanence.
I am something that's changing. Like I don't know.
Yeah, maybe underneath that there is something continuous, and so when I would look at experiences, I could see that I do see what they're saying. There's like an experiential pulse, and then another one, and then another one. Mm-hmm. But then I got very curious. It's like, well, maybe I can see in between these pulses. And what does it even mean? What is a single experience? Like, what does that even mean? How do you define that? I could feel it, but it didn't make a lot of intellectual sense.
It's like in time, in a way, it has to like differentiate something. Like you cannot look at millisecond. And you cannot you don't have an unlimited amount of time. You can like notice it.
Yeah. So I found that my attention did have a sort of bandwidth. It had a sort of, it could not see past a certain rate, like that 40 hertz, and. So, but then I was trying to look between experiences. It's like I could see that, okay, well, there's an experience, but it kind of had a rise time. It kind of went up, then it kind of went back down again. And then there was an experience of me saying I saw that, being conscious of it. And then there's another, and it's like, oh, if I can just see the trough in between them, I'm going to catch another thing in between. And what I struggled. I kept trying to do that, and I never could. It's like I reached a limit of what's possible. And Ingram said it's not possible to go any further either. And then I had a thought about it. I don't know if this is true, but it's always been in my head, is that the reason we feel like a singular thing and a distinct entity is because we only have one experience at a time. That's serial. It's singular, one experience at a time. If we had two experiences at a time, we'd feel like two different things. We would have this experience of being two things at once, but we don't have that. So why not? Well, I noticed that I can't get consciously between those two experiences. And I had this connection that, if I did, I would lose consciousness. That in the subconscious state, we are manifold. We are many things. We are experiencing all these things at once. But in the conscious state, it goes to the serial thing. And you can't see behind that because you become unconscious. It's the little refrigerator light that shuts off. When you shut the door, you can't ever open the door and catch the light. It's just there's a switch there.
Everything, maybe it's just quantum. It's all like those discrete.
I don't know. It's like you can't catch the refrigerator light turning on because it's.
I've heard Art say the same thing about like there's like there's a electric current going this way across the brain, and that like there's some threshold, and he feels like it's just like these frames, in a film, and his intuition was if you could somehow slip between those frames, that would that would be it. So it's kind of interesting that you're like talking about it in that way.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be the
Yeah.
same
Maybe
sort of
that's
idea.
maybe why, like in deep sleep or some state, maybe where only subconsciousness is maybe possible. It's maybe seen things at once, but I guess you cannot remember it because it's such a state where only consciousness can like record something to memory, but maybe unconsciousness cannot like record anything to memory. Possible.
It could be. It could be.
I got a question. Like, you know, he talks about the three characteristics, and then he kind of correlates that at the end with this idea of like the three doors. You know what I'm talking about? And where it's like there's a door per characteristic. You
Yeah.
kind of go into
Yeah.
realization or whatever through these.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because maybe I'm wrong, but I don't get the sense like you got to some point where you really got an idea of non-existence, that you had that experience of like being up against oblivion, that you're this in the pit of the gut, that you're afraid if you go past this point you're gonna be like annihilated. I
No.
just wonder if like that's maybe like a
No.
certain door for some people, because that's been a
Yeah, he said
Big
the
experience in
suffering
my life.
characteristic, the dissatisfaction
Yeah, okay.
characteristic is
Yeah.
a doorway that has those features.
The dissatisfaction one
Yeah.
is the one I was just talking about. But,
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. Yeah, but yeah, I did not have fear like that at all. So,
It's interesting to me. Because yeah, some people say you have to pass through the fear of death, like some fear of death, big experience. Yeah, but not everybody says this, though, probably. Yeah.
I don't. There could be as many experiences as there are
Bob
people.
didn't- Yeah, Bob didn't have it, so I think Bob didn't.
Bob Harwood, yeah, right. I was afraid of death, but then when I realized that I was afraid of something I'd made up, that I could never actually contemplate non-existence, that seemed to fall away from me. But then I was saying the other night that TAT was telling me that I was afraid. You know, I was a coward. And then one night I was dreaming, and in the dream I became lucid, and I was orbiting a black hole in the dream, and the black hole represented the absolute enlightenment, emptiness, annihilation, but truth. And I was right next to it, and I said, "Oh, do I want this?" I said, "Hell yeah, let's go right in there." And I just went right in. Of course, I wake up after that, but I realized from that dream it told me it's not fear. It's not fear holding me back. It's just an illusion that I haven't figured out yet. It's just something that I'm confused about. It wasn't fear stopping me. But everyone's different.